Today's theme of Stefan Frank's photo book talk is New Topographics, Photographs of a Man-Altered Landscape. So I am very excited you're all here, and I'm especially excited that Stefan is doing this. And I will hand it over to Stefan, and you may get started.
Thank you so much, Anja. And thank you all for being here. I'm also very excited because this show today is very dear to my heart. So this is, for those of you who have taken one or the other course with me, you probably know a lot of the images that I will show and a lot of these books I will talk about, because this is in some way my photographic DNA, the new topographics. And I'm excited to talk about especially one book that I managed to get in the past few weeks, which is unfortunately almost out of print. And I managed to snatch one of it, and I'm happy to show it to you. So without further ado, so today's topic is a photograph is a five-sided flat object. Why this is the title of that, we will come to this at the end of these slides. Today's topic will be the New Topographics exhibition in 1975. The New Topographics was an exhibition of photographs of a man-altered landscape. It took place in October 1975 to February 1976 in George Eastman's house, International Museum of Photography in Rochester, New York. So this is a singular exhibition, but it had quite an impact on the photographic landscape and also on the museum landscape, how photographs enter a museum and how they are distributed in a museum. So today's topic will be, why was that the case? Why was this so impactful? And what was the surrounding of these photographers here? And basically, it's about the question that was 50 years ago. Why are we still talking about this? Because I think everybody who is at least a little bit in this photographic scene knows about the new topographics. So it has become something of a household name. So why are we doing this? Why are we talking about this? So in order to find out why this is, let's start by talking about landscape photography. And this is a weird topic. So it has two parts. It has landscape in it. So we have to find out what actually is landscape. And it also has this photography part in there. So how was photography impacted by this exhibition and by the idea of landscape photography? So this is what we all know how landscape photography is. Of course, this is Ansel Adams of Tetons and Snake River. So we all know about Ansel Adams and the way that he photographed. He was photographing in the national parks of the US, was the official photographer for these national parks. So his idea was always no people, just landscape, just nature. And he was always there, very interested in the beauty of this landscape and about this pristine, untouched state of nature in there. So this is something we all know. When in pictures of this era of the 40s and 50s, houses appeared, they were always appearing in a way like in a harmonious combination between houses and nature. This is from a book that we talked about the last time, when this is a book from Paul Strand, from Time in New England. So Minor White, an important photographer of that era, talked about, had made this book Manifestations of the Spirit. So for him, he encountered landscape as some sort of non-human, superhuman entity. So for him, it was an encounter with spirit. All these nature photographs in his book, they have this very spiritual feel to them, this almost meditative air about them. So this was always an encounter with something that transcends us as humans. So he made beautiful pictures, and these beautiful pictures are always about this, have this meditative air about them. And this is the way we perceived landscape. So, and it is no accident that when you encounter landscape paintings like this here, this is the beautiful water lilies by Claude Monet, which hangs in the Benessa Art Museum on this island Naoshima in Japan. This is the reason why museums almost look like churches. So they allow us to encounter landscape photography in this very, in this adorative mode of looking at nature. So it also has this the spiritual view about them. Of course, painters, even in this era, like Georgia O'Keeffe, she painted in this way. So this was also the way landscape painting was conceived at that time. So she made these very beautiful pictures of the American countryside. This is the Black Mesa landscape near New Mexico. And she continued through her whole life with this ending on very abstract views that also are always an encounter with the transcendent nature. This is not a mode that has been that has just eventually ended when things changed. This is something that still goes on. So we have photographers like Michael Kenner. This is from 2013. So this kind of encountering nature and being meditative about nature, this is something that just continued. So when you look at these pictures, they all have a spiritual, ahistoric connection to landscape. There is no history in this landscape. The nature just is. It just exists, and it is transcendent and disconnected from our human life. Landscape is seen as existing on a plane that is untouched and untouchable by humans. This is the reason why Ansel Adams so adamantly insisted on very rarely having any people in his landscape pictures. And this is why I always sometimes tend to get an angle where these nasty little tourists that are all over the place, while I try to crop them out of my pictures sometimes. But you see from these small discussions already, the times have changed. So our feelings toward nature has changed. This was something that was felt already during the wartime. This is from Max Ernst. This is Europe After the Rain. This is from 1941. Max Ernst had a different view of landscape. So for him, landscape was a scarred place, a place that holds, that bears the marks of our conflicts, of our wars, of our atrocities. Of course, that has to do something with the war. And if you have ever seen this documentation by Alain Resnais, who was one of the first one who made this, who made a documentation on the Holocaust and on the places where the Holocaust took place. His concept of landscape is also different. He feels that the atrocities that happened in Germany, the atrocities that happened in in the concentration camps, they scarred the landscape. So something is left in the landscape, and we cannot look at the landscape with the innocent eyes that we had before the war. So, of course, in his documentary, he's not only showing the landscape surrounding Auschwitz and Birkenau, he's also showing the places of these atrocities. And if you look at a picture like this, you see that he is tying the architecture. He's showing the architecture as somewhat related to these tragedies and to these atrocities that happened there. Painters also were appalled by this. So the landscape painting after the war was different than it was before the war. Quite literally, in the pictures of Anselm Kiefer, he is writing directly on his canvas. For him, the landscape is always a thing that gets written and overwritten by the history that happens inside this landscape. So this is from 1980, from his cyclist on Margarete. Gerhard Richter, for Gerhard Richter, he is always taking photos as his jumping off point for his pictures. So he did a Birkenau cyclus, so a cycle of pictures that start with pictures that were smuggled out of Birkenau. So this, of course, is also landscape photography and has photography as a starting point. And this kind of paintings are different from a transcendent view of landscape. They always have a connection between history and humans and landscape. So to understand why this changed view of landscape photography, how this came about, I think it is important to see where the people that were featured in this show, what was their background? What was the background in their history, in the art history? So they were very much, pretty much everybody was very much enmeshed in the art scenes, both on the west side, surrounding Los Angeles and San Francisco on the one hand, and then the east side, of course, of the New York art scene of the abstract expressionism. Here we see Mark Roscoe, who changed painting in a way. Cy Twombly, who was always about this painting gestures, this writing gestures. Pretty much every photographer we would see, we will be looking at, knew about these pictures, knew about this way how abstract expressionism expressed themselves, how the painters worked, what they discussed at that time. Lewis Baltz, who we will be looking at, he was a great fan of Bruce Nauman and his language pictures. The idea that words and writings can form actual pictures here. This is, of course, Pay Attention, Motherfuckers from 1973. Clear vision here. So this idea of representation and a different way of tackling the canvas and being aware how a canvas works and being aware that the canvas itself is not something that you are only looking through. It's not like a window onto the world, but it is a thing in and by itself. This was, of course, central to the art scenes at that time. So, and here, for example, this is Barnett Newman. So abstract expressionism gave up the idea that painting has to represent something in the world. Barnett Newman was always very outspoken about this idea that a canvas is a thing in and by itself, and you have to look at it for what it is, not for what it shows. And this eventually led to a very influential essay by Michael Fried, who talked about art and objecthood. So the idea that a canvas is something. It is something, and it doesn't only show something of the world, but it is a thing in and by itself. Photography became at that time very, very important for painters here. This is, of course, at Rochester's 26 gasoline station, which is, strangely enough, exactly what the title suggests. It is pictures of gasoline stations. And Rochester was not exactly a photographer, so he was very candid about just standing in front of a gasoline station and depicting it the way he sees it. And he made these 26 pictures of gasoline stations where there is nothing special about these gasoline stations. You can see them everywhere. And just this gesture of putting them together in the book, this is what constitutes the artwork here. And of course, Rochester would continue on this trajectory, looking at very candid, everyday, mundane things and working them into their into paintings. So not only was this gesture of objecthood was important for art, but that was a time when things really started to be mass-produced. Everything was mass-produced. The things we buy were mass-produced, but also movies were mass-produced. So artists at that time started picking up on that, like Andy Warhol made this picture about National Velvet, a movie that was starring Liz Taylor, and he just reproduced always the same picture and put it on a canvas. So the idea to take himself as a painter out of the equation and just being doing a mechanical reproduction of that and making this gesture, this artwork, this is as a way to mimic the commodification that was happening all over the place in societies at that time. And he was very outspoken about this. So he was saying everything can be a commodity, even atrocities like a picture of an electric chair can become a commodity. And he was also very anti-genius. So he was, of course, he was very aware that he was a genius himself, but he was very against this idea of a painter is always, painting is always something to do with art. So this is why he did this screen prints all the time. And he had his assistants actually do these screen prints just to remove himself from this equation of making art. So this was the background upon which the new topographics exploded in 1975. So everybody was aware of this. Everybody was looking at pictures like this. And so it was very natural that the exhibition was looking at mundane things. They weren't looking at tract houses. They were looking at gas stations, at water towers and water coolers. So this was the exhibition in 75. Just to make that very obvious, Stephen Shore was part of this exhibition. Stephen Shore started his photographic career at the factory, at Andy Warhol's factory. So when he was 17, this was his first gig to photograph Andy Warhol and all the art scene. So he was very much enmeshed into this New York art scene. So when you look at pictures like this, that frame photography different, you clearly see the influence of Andy Warhol, and you clearly see the influence of these grids that Andy Warhol was using, the idea of reproducing something that is already mass-produced. And of course, that led him to pictures that were completely different than the ones that Ansel Adams were. And Ansel Adams was very careful not to photograph the parking lots that led to the national parks. Stephen Shaw was standing exactly on the parking lot for a national park. And this picture makes clear that even the nature, even the national parks have been commodified here. They are to be consumed. People go there to consume nature. So, and it is very natural that the pictures he made, he also looked at how this commodity of nature, of landscape, eventually appears on a billboard. So when you have a commodity, you have to have an advertisement for this. Just to show another photographer that we've already talked about at length, Robert Adams was also part of this exhibition. So his feeling was very much this hurt about how nature changed, how the West is changing, and how this untouched landscape is slowly disappearing. So he was always talking about this connection between these trailer parks and the nature that surrounds them. From Germany, the Bechers, Bernd and Hilla Becher, were part of this. And it is very weird to think in this context of Ansel Adams and his concept of landscape photography, to think that this is landscape photography. Of course, the Bechers were photographing an industrialized landscape. They were pretty much aware that our concept, the concept of landscape for most of us, when we look out of the window, we don't look at untouched nature. We look at things like this, like gas tanks or water towers. And they were working in this series. And if you look at the dates here, they were working tirelessly and endlessly on this series. The gas tank series took them more than 40 years to complete. So they were, wherever they were, they took always the same pictures with the same vantage point. Again, here is the same idea that Andy Warhol had, to take themselves out of the equation and to be very technical about photography and be very reproducible. And of course, the people at MoMA know about this connection between photography and the art scene at this time. This is why this is one of the reasons why this artwork by Joseph Kossut and the water towers by the Becher, they appear side by side in the MoMA. But we have to understand that this new topographic exhibition was basically the one event that introduced photography into museums. Before that, pictures were small. Pictures were about showing something else. They were not an artwork in and by themselves. This changed in the 70s, and it changed rather drastically. So this exhibition was all about man-altered landscapes. And these were the artists that appeared in there. And if you look at them, these are very different people. Not all of them are alike, not all of them work similar, and they appeared in the same exhibition. And when I looked at some of the interviews that that were made when people left the exhibition, the exhibition was not a great success when it came out. So people were very bored. They said, okay, why should I look at that? It's not beautiful, it's repetitive, it's boring, it's mass production, it's industry. I don't want to look at that. So it was not an immediately obvious success. And that had something to do with what William Jenkins, the curator of the New Topographics, said is some kind of stylistic anonymity, the idea that you take yourself out of the equation, that you're not artful about what you photograph. You just stand in front of a water tower and you photograph it. You stand in front of a gasoline station and you pick up what you see there. So neither is a thing that you photograph immediately interesting, nor is the way that you photograph it very stylish. So it's very matter of fact. Strangely enough, from this initially very successful exhibition, this had quite a trajectory. It had quite a trajectory here in Germany. Bernd Becher afterwards became professor at Düsseldorfer Kunstakademie here, which was one of the first photography programs here in Germany at that time. He has been there for 20 years. And he became, they became mother and father of what would then be called the Düsseldorf School of Photography. So they had a lot of photographers that eventually became very famous. And that had something to do with size and the fact that these photographs eventually appeared in museums. And here, this is Andreas Gorski, one of the guys that appeared in the Düsseldorf School. This is Rhein 2, which is one of the most expensive photograph ever sold. So it's sold for I think about 3.3 million eventually, and that has something to do with the size, with the enormous size of this canvas, and the fact that it appears in a museum. Thomas Struth, also a proponent of this Düsseldorf school, he learned a lot from these exhibitions, from the way how to hang his pieces, how to form his photographs into a coherent artwork where you don't look at a singular photograph, but you look at photographs as a series. That also was something that started appearing at around that time, and that went on. So Laurens Bergers was also with the Bechers. He's working in this style of photography, in this new topographic style of photography until today. So he's still making photo books like this, like in 2020. So Robert Adams, we will not cover Robert Adams because we covered Robert Adams a lot, but we will look at these three people here: Lewis Baltz, Bernd, Hilla, Becher, and Henry Wessel. And let me end these slides on this quote by Lewis Baltz. He was asked, what are the principal formal problems in your work? The edge, quite literally. The major issue is the question of where to place the edge, what to include or exclude. A photograph is a five-sided flat object. In its construction, those sides must be considered and referred to. The fifth side, the frontal plane, the surface of the print, acts as a reference for the space that the image occupies. The plausibility of that fictive space rests entirely upon the concerns shown for the print surface. What a weird thing to say. So this is where the quote comes from. A photograph is a five-sided flat object. And if you look at that idea, what an interesting idea to have, that a photograph is an object. And not only it shows something, but it is an object in and by itself. With that, let me come to the books. This is Basic Forms. Basic Forms is a book by Bernd and Hilla Becher. They did not exactly make that book themselves. So I'm not aware that they made any books. They are thinking in series, like I am doing water towers, or I'm doing Fördertürme, I'm doing gas tanks. This is the way they think. They do not think in books. And so this Basic Forms, Grundformen, this collects a whole lot of series of them. So for example, let's start with cooling towers. This is very typical of the new topographics. You get exactly what is written on the cover. When it says water tower, you get a picture of water towers. There's no surprises here. And of course, these pictures here, well, they are pictures of a lot of water towers. And what is interesting about these pictures is that although they all have this very similar, the exactly same function, they all look very different. So, and this is the core of making a topology. So the idea that you look at things that are similar, and you look at what are the difference? What are they when you look at them not for their functions, but you look at them for what they are, things that exist and that occupy space and that have a certain appearance. And these pictures are technically masterpieces. You have to understand that all these pictures are very much alike. And as those of you who have been, we all have been photographing quite a long time now, but we all know how hard it is to photograph things exactly the same, to make them maximally comparable. That is very hard to do, and that is especially hard to do when you ever look at how they photograph that. So they spend weeks with researching each and everything that they want to photograph. They make a test shot. They surround it to find the right vantage point, to find the right combination of lenses, to photograph it without any distractions. So this is technically very hard to do. And this is something that you do not see when you look at the pictures here, because you think, you immediately start to relate to these people that went out of the new Topographics exhibition and said, okay, this is boring. Why am I looking at that? And it's interesting to see this in a book, because I have to be honest with you here. I never managed to get through this book in one reading. So what you usually do is, okay, I want to know something about Getreidesilos. And then you look at this work, and then you later pick it up. I am much more an admirer of the Bechers than I actually love them. There is some variation in the end here. So you see that they have eventually made some close-up shots, which are which they do not consider part of their work. They consider just part of their research to look at these kind of details and make these detail shots, because they rarely show them in exhibitions. So what they usually show in these exhibitions is these pictures grouped in grids or grouped in on a wall. They rarely show combinations of this and this, because this is not what they do. Overall, this is a great book. It's great printed. It's very important. It's a very important book. But we see what is all missing, what we are so used to. That doesn't have an arc. It doesn't have a story arc. There is no first act, second act, third act. There is just pictures of basic forms. So with this being said, let's look at something different. Let's look at Henry Wessel. You can immediately see, okay, this is different. So it's different in size. This is, here we are entering Steidl territory. Gerd Steidl he pretty much owns most of the new Topographics. So most of the books by the new Topographics, except for the Bechers and Stephen Shore, they all come out with Steidl. And Henry Wessel, who was also in the initial exhibition here, is no exception to that. So he did a lot of books with Steidl here. And this groups together 3 works by Henry Wessel. And it's interesting to look at this book and when we remember last month's show, which was all about text and text and images. This contains almost no text. So it starts with traffic, and traffic is a series that Henry Wessel did when he was commuting from Richmond, California to San Francisco in the morning rush hour. So again, it's very matter of fact. You stand in traffic, you photograph, you get pictures of traffic. There's no surprises here, which is very common to the new topographic. There are rarely any surprises here. But in contrast to the Bechers, here every picture contains a story. It contains a human and it contains a story. So if you look at this, there is, just by the fact that there's a human in here, and the human has this weird looking sunglasses. Let me zoom close to this. And he has his sunglasses, and he has his side, the side of his car is battered. So Henry Wessel is very different from the Bechers, because every picture here tells a story. It's, to me, it feels more like the short stories by Raymond Carver. You get just some nuggets of information, and then you can make up your own story. What happened here? What is this guy with his long hair and his sunglasses and his worn down car? What has happened here? And so every picture has this one-liner of a story here. What are these people thinking? What is this guy thinking here? What is she doing in this slightly older car? Is it her car? Is it a car she inherited from her parents? Sometimes you have people looking at the photographer. So every picture is slightly different, which is, again, it has this feeling of typology, because every picture is a picture of a car in traffic. But of course, it's very different from this, where every picture is just about the same. And there is no story arc in it. So this is the first part. The second part is Sunset Park. Sunset Park is a modest neighborhood in Santa Monica. And he was photographing there at night. So this is very similar to, if you remember at Robert Adams' Summer Night Walking, this is a very similar feel to this. So he has this nighttime pictures in there, very beautiful nighttime pictures. But again, the same way of photographing, all these tiny little stories here, this dark alley and this little light here underneath. And let me show you my favorite picture of this. And this is one thing that I always show in the nighttime photography class when I talk about intentional light. Here, this is a perfect Raymond Carver single story. We see the newspaper lying on the floor at night. We have the closed down blinds, but everything is very tidy. So what has happened here? Why did the person not pick up the newspaper? And then you start thinking, what has happened here? Is he gone? Is he on vacation? Why didn't he cancel his newspaper? Is he in there? So all sorts of storylines that start with this very simple observation here. So this is Sunset Park, and let's get back to the initial idea here. So this is a 3-part book. So it has a setup. We are driving into the city. We are coming back at night and reside in our suburb. And the third part, let me show you the end of this. Here it ends with things that slowly degrade. So you have this fence here, then you have this relationship between the fence and the nature that surrounds it. So everything starts to get about time. And here he ends on this staircase that leads into wherever. So now we're in the suburbs. The last part is Continental Divide. So Continental Divide is about getting out of the city. So Continental Divide is a road trip from the Midwest into the Rocky Mountains. So it starts in the suburbs, has similar houses than we have already seen, and we slowly take the road outside, take the road to the outside. Then we look at the town behind us, the structures that we are now leaving, and then we're taking the road into the Rocky Mountains. So this becomes some sort of a road trip. And you have these encounters here in a road trip. All this gets some sort of, looks like movie stills. So you always imagine, okay, what kind of a movie is happening here? What is happening on this road? What is happening on this road trip? And let me skip to the end of this, because in the end of this, there are the first people appearing again. And again, this is like a movie still. This is, again, this one-liner of a story where you have people walking on this road, where you start thinking, oh, okay, what has happened to them? Has their car broken down? Have they run out of gas? Is it a couple who have just robbed a bank? Or all sorts of things that you start imagining. And of course, it ends open-ended, the open road. So strangely enough, you have these two things here, these two people that appear in the same exhibition. But if you look at them more closely, they are very different from each other. So with this, let's come to this one, because this is the one that I was talking about. This is Lewis Baltz, the prototype works. This is Lewis Baltz's graduation thesis. So he studied at Claremont University in San Francisco Art Institute. And he was taking photographs, and he was friends with all the with Bruce Nauman and Steve Shore and Barnett Newman. So when he photographs like this. He's photographing these anonymous structures that make up the cities. And he was the one, if you remember this quote, he was talking about this idea that a photograph is an object in and by itself. It's a five-sided flat object. And so he was always about loosening the connection to the thing that he photographed. So he was more interested in how things appear on the plane of the photo. And this is why his constructions, his images are so meticulously constructed. He was working endlessly on getting the contrast right and erasing a lot of information. Like here, you see here behind this car, this wall, this is just pitch black. So this is not a picture that is in any way connected to the place where it was taken. It is just forms that are put on a plane. And weirdly enough, he's always making these pictures of very anonymous structures where you can't figure out where this is, but he's always putting, don't know if you can see that here, but he's always putting a place and a date next to it. So it's like he's doing two things at once. He's saying, okay, this could be, this is no place at all. This is not a real place. And on the other hand, he says, okay, this is a very real place. So in his work, you always see these references to the artist he was admiring. Here, this is why he was talking about the picture's flat object. This appears like a non-three-dimensional structure. So he was very outspoken about erasing all references to the three-dimensionality of the world. So here, this is actually a plane that leads to this, a structure that leads to this setup here, to this wall here. So there's a 90-degree angle here between this plane and this plane, at least in the real world, but not in his picture. So here you see the Barnett-Newman references, the idea that you have a plane is just something that can be divided by two, by a zip in the middle here. He was working in this vein, in this idea of minimality, to reduce a picture to a point where there's almost nothing left. A picture like this talks about things that have vanished, things that have broken down. And of course, this is his nod to Ed Ruscha and Bruce Nauman with their idea that words can be pictures in and by themselves. I want to point out this, I want to point out this essay here, which is from Michael S. Witkowski, which was a curator at San Francisco MoMA. This is a brilliant essay, and this brought me into this idea to put these three people here together. Because if you look at these three people, they appeared in the same exhibition. And everybody has a completely different approach to photography and to the way they approach this idea of new topographic and of landscape photography. So, and he was pointing that out, that Lewis Baltz in this regard is very special in his approach to objecthood, to making a picture, a photograph into an object. This was the last, this was actually his last work where he had single pictures here. So he went on to making artworks that are comprised of multiple pictures, very much like the Bechers did with their water towers. That not a single picture is the work, but it's only the combination of all the pictures here. And let me end on one thing, because this is very much a tribute to these guys, to the new topographics. The Düsseldorf School owes this exhibition a lot, and it's also myself who owes this people a lot. So let me end on this one, because I made my own book, and when I revisit especially this one, the prototype works by Lewis Baltz, you immediately see how much we owe the photographers that came before us. So we are consciously or unconsciously, we are always reproducing their pictures. Let me talk about the concept of this book. So this book it owes a lot to Lewis Baltz. So when you remember this idea that you have one picture that is very anonymous and there is one picture, then there is a date and a place right next to it. This is the structure of this book. So the book is called Irgendwo, which is in English anywhere. And it actually comes from a teacher of mine who set these pictures and said, they could be anywhere, could be from anywhere. But they are not. So it has on the back side, it has a list of exact dates and places. When you Google these places and dates, you will find something like this. So all of these places are places in Germany where in recent history terror has happened. A lot of these terror attacks came from the NSU, a neo-Nazi terror organization that was on a tour through Germany to attack migrant communities, but it's also about attacks on a synagogue in Hilla, which was also performed by a neo-Nazi. It is about Hoyerswerda in the former GDR, where the citizens, after the wall came down, were besieging a home for migrants from Vietnam. It is about an incident that happened during the pandemic where a guy was asked to wear a mask and he came back into the gas station and shot the person. It is about a killing of a politician. And if you look at these pictures and these places, you see, you immediately start to sense a pattern. And the pattern is that the images are reproducible, the incidents are reproducible, and you see a pattern that runs through the younger history of Germany. And this idea was the starting point for this book. So I started out visiting these places where terror had happened. And this is a structure. This is a thing that gave the book its structure. And I tip my hat to Henry Wessels here, because his idea to have an introduction, something that leads us into a city with anonymous buildings. This is something that I got from Henry Wessel. So the idea behind this book is somehow that we all interpret images by their context. So something that is more or less innocent looking, like these patches of dried out something, are, when you read the text and that you know that this is a parking lot where 2 people were killed, it immediately looks like dried blood. But nothing in the picture really gives you this hint. It's just the context that is given to you. So my interest here was pretty much inspired by the new topographics to see, okay, what is the surrounding? What is our surroundings? How do we live? Where do we live? How do the places look where these things happen? Is there something in the places that surrounds them that gives us an idea of what happened there? So, and of course, when I looked at Lewis Baltz prototypes, I knew where I've got a lot of these pictorial strategies from. So a lot of these are informed from this idea of standing in front of a house and photographing what you see. And throughout the pictures, there is always this idea, throughout the book, there's always this idea that we leave marks on these houses. So there are things written on them that say, I was here, I existed at that certain place, at that certain time. And something like this here, but now it's gone. So this is how cities work. So this is my very own special personal Germany tour.
Bravo, Stefan. I was wondering what you were doing with yourself photographically.
Well, now you know. Now you know.
Now I know.
Looks great.
Yeah. So this is, of course, this is a mixture of dealing with this, coming to terms with this series of terror attacks here in Germany that assume some kind of pattern. And of course, this is also a book of mourning, because lives were lost, and we very quick in forgetting about this. We dismiss that people actually died. They died behind the news headlines. We have one headline, we have one incident, we look at the pictures, and then we move on. So in parallel to the end to this, there's also an outro to this, and it ends up on this picture. And this is just to tip my hat to the new Topographics, because apart from the travels, I owe these people and this exhibition a lot. So this is my little tribute to them.
Wonderful, Stefan.
Very good.
Congratulations to your book. This is super exciting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very beautiful. The images are absolutely beautiful. I think you told me that a lot of these places where terror happened that you photographed are very small towns with only a few thousand people sometimes. Is that, do you remember that correctly?
This is a lot of these pictures, a lot of these themes here are very weird. So this is a picture from Ishtar. Ishtar is a city where Walter Lübcke was killed, and this is a small town. It only has 200 or 300 people. It's only a couple of houses, and you walk through this tiny little village with your camera, and you follow the footsteps of this person who had killed Walter Lübcke. So he made the same route, and this is an eerie feeling. This is very weird to do that. And there was this moment when I was standing in front of the house of Walter Lübcke. The pictures of this house are not in this book. I intentionally left them out because I have to admit that I also shied away from showing these kinds of sensationalist pictures here. When I was standing in front of that, there was a car arriving there, and a young woman got out and went into the house. And this was when I feel really started questioning my own work there. So what are you actually doing there? What is this project about? Because you suddenly realize these are actual people live there, actual people died there. So she was related in somehow to Walter Lübcke. Maybe it was her father, maybe it was an uncle, I don't know. But when you do a photographic project like this, all of these things, which are very, let me show you the pictures again. Oops. Let me show you the Google searches again. This is very unreal. So the Google searches are very unreal. These are very prefabricated images that you consume over the internet. You see them on TV or you see them on the internet, but this does not feel real. But if you're actually standing there suddenly this assumes a weird reality.
Did you also speak to people? I mean, did you interview them or try, or maybe not interview, but did you start conversations about your project, or did you really just go and take pictures?
No, I used to, pretty much at every place I talked to the people. So one of the places is Heidelberg, where I work and live. This was one of the reasons why I did this project, because I live here in 500 meters away from the university where a mass shooting took place. So I was actually sitting at my desk when this happened. So of course you talk to the people, and everybody you talk to only knows it about, we all know it only from TV. So nobody was there. So actually you are in the place, but you also know it from this here, you know it from the media. And everybody I talked has this sense of fleeting reality, that you can't believe that this actually happened. We all grapple with this, okay, how real is it really? And I talked to some of the people in Ishtar there. It's different when you actually know the people that died there. So Walter Lübcke, he was the head of the local football club. So he was actually always, every Sunday, he was at the games of the local football club there. So everybody knew him. So suddenly he's gone. So this is for these tiny cities, it's very different than for bigger cities like Kassel or Heidelberg.
Okay, let's see if there are any questions for Stefan about any of the books or about his book.
So this is actually, so just to cap this off, this is actually the book that is out of print. So it's so lucky to get it again, because it's only this part of this, I don't know, 2,000 euro big Lewis Baltz box that Steidl is still selling, but the single book is sold out.
Stefan, I have a question about Bernd and Hilla Becher work regarding if you know how they created, if you know a little more about how they created these images, how much time they spent there, because there's, for example, never any sunlight, I think, right? I mean, there aren't a lot of shadows, so they always had to wait for overcast days. How did they do that? Patience. So they really lived in the area for a while. Is that how they did it?
I don't know. So they really spent a couple of, sometimes they spend a couple of weeks on singular shots there. This is the reason why it took them so long. When you, I think we looked at the water cooler project. The water cooler project took them almost 40 years to complete, because they were not only was they had to wait for the weather. They had to get the right vantage point. So from what I heard, the vantage point is always a huge issue, because you have to find a point that is not obstructed by anything before it or behind it. So you can imagine in a structure that like this, so they circulated this place for hours to find the right vantage point that actually worked. And then they had to wait for the weather, and then they had to wait to get the right exposure.
Right.
So patience.
May I? This is Andreas from Germany. There is on Arte, the German television or German Friends television broadcaster. They have a CD series on originals, and there's also the Bechers mentioned and shown, and there's a small, I think it's about 15 minutes of talk with them about how they came to do their work. And they talked also about the techniques they used with this, I think it's a 600 millimeter object lens they use for all these things.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, it's impressive. You will. I don't know if you can get it directly from Arte now because it's out of selling, but maybe on eBay you will find it. It's a series of I think it's four DVDs. Really nice. And I wanted to thank you very much for the introduction to the books, which were very impressive and enlightening also. In particular about the book on the traffic and going into the city and the ideas behind it. And thank you very much for your book about the NSU problems in Germany and the right-wing terror. That's very important that we remember this and yeah, see what is coming up here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
so
Andreas.
much.
I have another question about your book, Stefan. Have you considered including your Google search findings in the book? Because I found that quite interesting when you showed us these kind of contact sheets. Or are they in the book? No, they're not in the book, right?
No, they're not in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I went back and forth on that. I went back and forth on the exhibition styling there because there was an exhibition for that. And the initial idea for the exhibition was just to put these Google views in big on one wall and the pictures in very small on the other side. Eventually, I decided against this layout because it's a German book. It's a very German problem. And everybody has these pictures inside his head. So I think everybody is aware of these kinds of pictures. And I wanted to clear the space, make it open and not oppress people with, okay, these are places of violence, because this is what happens after this usually tends to be much more complex. It tends to be about, there is this one picture in here, like this one. This is from Hanau. And immediately after this happens, there are a lot of rituals that happen. So I have politicians that appear in front of microphones and they make their speeches. You have people that try to remember that. You have haggles about how to actually remember that, make a memorial, make a placate or something. And all of this goes into happens in these pictures and happens in the aftermath of this. And I wanted to show, to focus on this, how we deal with it, how the cities deal with it, how it happens in the cities. And for this, I wanted to get out eventually I decided against having these pictures in there that limit the interpretation of the pictures and of the situation.
Right. Also, I mean, the town is not only about that, right? The town is a town. There's a lot of other stuff going on.
Right. Yeah. It's also about, well, eventually it's about mourning. So it's about mourning and it's about moving on, because these cities, of course, they move on. They are removed. So the first city was Munich. So that was in the 80s. That's almost 40 years, more than 40 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Stefan. I think we went over today. We went over a little bit. But just in case there's one more question, I give you the opportunity. All right. Stefan, thank you so much. This was great. Very informative once again. beautiful books, beautiful presentation, and thank you all for coming.
Thank
See you
so
next
much for
time.
coming. Thank you so much for your patience.